organization through perpetual disruption, which is really what we are all facing right now. I have a background in academia, which was the first part of my career where I was a researcher and professor in an IO psychology program. I've got my IO psychology degree and then was in academia for about 5 years and really loved that. Ran a research lab on the intersection of work and non-work life and our health. Then pivoted and joined the company BetterUp early stage and helped build BetterUp Labs. Did that for about 6 years, and then now have joined forces with the wonderful Shauna Waters, and we have built our own enterprise, Fractional Insights. So that's a little bit about me. And a part of our mission as Fractional Insights is to really support the application and translation of the science of organizational psychology and behavioral science, to really make it an advantage and asset for organizations that are trying to achieve their goals. And one of the things that we've realized through our career experiences and life experience is that there's a lot of science that just doesn't actually get the play it deserves in actually being useful for leaders who are trying to make decisions to really help their organization achieve its objectives. And yet, because organizations are collections of human beings, it can be very handy to have some good frameworks and insights that can support the crafting and creating and designing of environments that are going to be conducive to people behaving in the way that helps the organization to achieve their goals. And behavior is driven by psychology. And so we talk a lot about the underlying unseen forces at play inside of organizations.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I'm just getting excited for not only what you have to share, but what you're bringing to the world. Because yes, there's a knowing doing gap with Jeffrey Pfeffer highlighted 20 plus years ago. And here we are in the age of AI and the speed of information. Leaders are overwhelmed, yet there is science, both that's been around for a long time and that needs to be created to represent the realities in the systems for which they're responsible at this point in time. And you're bringing a framework by which to identify the appropriate data, the appropriate measures, the appropriate processes to absorb it. So yeah, I certainly celebrate what you all are doing. And today you are going to talk about employee angst, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is your first research report under the auspices of Fractional Insights. Is that right?
That's right. This was our first big industry insights report, and we're super excited to share it with you and whoever's listening.
All right. Well, let me get out of the way, give you the floor for the next 10, 12 minutes, and we'll come back and talk about it. Sound good?
Sounds great. All right, so I'm going to walk you all through kind of a high-level overview of the research study that we conducted and the top-line insights that we found. The title of our report is The Risk of Angst, and then the subtitle here is How Unmet Human Needs Are Creating Drag on Organizational Performance. And part of the reason why we were really interested in studying this is both because in the data, things like Gallup's engagement data that came out maybe a month ago that showed that engagement has reached a 10-year low, and other places and sources of data about the erosion of trust in our societal fabric, and also knowing what's happening in our macro environment and the economic environment, where we're noticing lots of forces that are impacting the overall psychology in the workforce. And then how that shows up in organizational structures and systems is really important for leaders to understand, because these are really powerful forces at play. And so because we're facing such disruption as well with AI and technology coming in, these things are really compounding upon each other and creating lots of struggle, both for the individual and for the organizational systems that are really trying to adapt and figure out their pathway forward. And so you think about things like skills gaps or labor shortages or the widespread disengagement problem and underperformance issues that many other organizations, I think BetterUp came out with a report last week about performance. So there's just a lot of noise and a lot of identification of these big pressures that organizations are facing. And part of what gets in the way with being able to navigate these things successfully is that organizations generally they're not psychologists. Like leaders in general have like pretty good understanding of human behavior, but there's so much complexity and richness to the human experience that we think as organizational psychologists we can add to the sort of toolkit for organizations trying to navigate these things. So what we have noticed is that organizations tend to have a fundamental misalignment between how they are viewing humans and human behavior and how they have structured and organized their work systems and processes. And when there is misalignment between those two things, that's when we end up seeing a lot of anxiety, or what we're calling work-related angst in our study. But these feelings of angst arise from three fundamental human needs, which are really pretty simple. And so part of what I'm going to do today in this time that I have with you, Al, is to try to make what feels kind of messy, kind of complex or squishy stuff about people really simple and easy to understand, and easy to implement inside of organizations to make positive change that is both beneficial for the individual who is experiencing their organization, but also for the organization because it supports getting their goals met. So it's a win-win if we can get this recipe right. And so we're trying to uncover and reveal the recipe that's going to be helpful for organizations who are wanting to leverage it to their advantage. So to start with, what the basic human needs are, we have looked across lots of different theories. There's lots of social psychologists and social scientists that have really done incredible work putting together theories and frameworks and measurement strategies to understand human motivation and what really drives behavior. So when Sean and I were embarking on this research study, we were looking across all of those and sort of saying, okay, what are the three basic things that are really reflected across all of these different approaches to describing human motivation and behavior? And what we came up with we're calling it the universal triad. So there's three human needs that most every human nearly universally says that they need. That is the need for security. So the need for security is about feeling like your environment is predictable, that you have some degree of stability in meeting your basic human needs. So things like food and water and shelter and all the basic things that we need to survive. And so what that looks like in the workforce is the need for financial security, knowing that we have a job that is relatively predictable and stable, and that there's not threats in the environment to that being taken away from us. Things that create threat in the environment are things like unfairness, lack of information, ambiguity, mistreatment. So you can think of a lot of things that kind of call into question one's standing and one's attachment level or sense of security with their organization and where they stand. Those are the conditions under which we're seeing like the erosion of security and our inability to meet that basic need of the need for security. When that arises, we call that the angst of insecurity. The second one is our need for growth. And so humans generally have a desire to evolve over time. And so we are seeking and desire to have experiences that allow us to realize our potential. And that means learning new things or building new skills, having an opportunity for career advancement in the workforce. That's one sort of artifact of our need for growth. So if we talk about our need for career growth or our desire for career growth, it's really reflective of the underlying root need, which is our need as a human being to feel like we're moving forward and that we're not stagnant. And so when organizations are not providing the conditions under which a person feels confident that they have a pathway for skill development, personal development, professional development, career growth, ability to learn new things, ability to try new things in order to experiment and take some risks and generate new ideas and really, again, like reach your potential. When those conditions are not present in the environment, then we see the angst of stagnation. So that's the second angst that we were looking at. And then the third need that almost universally humans have is the need for significance. And that means like our need to feel like we matter, like we are seen, we're heard, we're accepted, we belong, that we are important. And so how this manifests and how we talk about it inside of organizations is often things like purpose, meaning, having recognition, having a chance to see the impact of your work and have a direct tie from the activity that you're doing to the impact on, say, the customer or the patient or the end user, whatever it may be. And knowing that the time that you're spending is not futile or not wasted, because that really does not meet our needs if we feel like we are sort of irrelevant or wasting time. And so you can also think about how that need right now is under a lot of threat, given that AI is really able to do a lot of things that humans can do. And so when we feel like we're insignificant or we feel like we are not seen, heard, understood, that we matter and we belong on all of those things, we see the angst of insignificance. And so one of the first things that we did in our study was we looked at, first, we wanted to kind of validate that these three human needs really do matter. And they matter within the organizational context, because there is a difference between thinking about human psychology at large or sort of in the wild, and human psychology inside of the physics of an organization, which has a lot of different forces at play, including politics, including power structures that are arguably unnatural to our normal way of collaboration and cooperation as a species. And we've created and invented these ways in which we organize around a shared goal and have our ability to achieve our basic needs of, money and healthcare access, at least in the United States. These things are bundled together, our ability to stay embedded and stay a part of the organization. And so there's lots of complexity around organizations and human behavior within organizations. That's why organizational psychology is so interesting and relevant for the organization, and that we have to think about not just psychology, but we have to think about psychology within a very unique context. So the first thing we did was we asked our participants, and in this study, we went to about 1,000 US employees. They were census matched, so representative across demographics, ages, race, gender, parental status, and then also represented across industries. So very cross demographic and cross representation sample. I think we had about 1,100 people respond to our survey, and this was in early 2025. And one of the first things we asked was the degree to which people really do expect that these needs are met through the organization. Because you can imagine something like growth. We could meet our growth needs through our jobs, but we could also meet our growth needs through independent time, like taking a class, investing in a hobby, growing through self-development work, reading books, doing coaching, all kinds of things that humans do outside of the workplace per se to meet their growth needs. But what we found was that nearly universally, people are looking for a lot of these needs to be met through their organization. And the number one thing that people are looking for, the most dominant thing that people are looking for, is security. So security is really important because of probably the reasons that I said earlier about how in our societal structure today, we've really bundled together the ability for us to meet our basic need of security and stability through work, right? So it makes sense. I think it was like 97% of people endorsed that security getting met through their work or their job is something that they really value. Now, the next thing that we looked at was the degree to which people say that their organization is essentially doing a good job at meeting those needs, and the gap there was pretty significant. So here on this slide, you can see the degree to which, okay, here we go. Yeah, 95% said that security was important. 92% said significance was important to them through work, and then 90% saying that growth was important. So that's how prevalent it is that we see work as a channel by which we're getting these needs met. On the other hand, the degree to which organizations are actually meeting those needs for people is a lot lower. And so you can see here for security, about half the time people feel like they are adequately getting their security needs met. That means that the other parts of the time there's a gap there. Significance 38% and growth 42%. So if you're listening to this and you're a leader of an organization or team, you might at this point be asking like, okay, but essentially, what does this matter for me? I'm a leader. Okay, people don't like it, but that's life. That's how the structure is that we've created in our collective manifestation of what we want society to look like. We've decided this is the way it is, and so what should I do about that? Or why should I care? Well, the way we see it and what we know is that ultimately fundamental human needs are at the one side of the causal chain, at the root side of the causal chain toward organizational performance. So let me explain a little bit more about that. And then I'll share with you a little more data before I stop talking. But so you can see at the top of this iceberg image, stock market performance. Stock market performance is going to like revenue. Let's just call it money. Money's at the top. We're all, the organization's ultimate goal is to make money and achieve their mission. And there's, lots of other things that organizations care about as well. But taking a big paintbrush across it, like, generating revenue for a profit, not a nonprofit, that's one of the major goals. So you've got stock market performance or money at the top. Underneath that is organizational performance. The better the organization is at performing, the more able they are to meet, their financial goals. Underneath that is how well the humans are performing, and are they efficient, and are they productive? Are they doing the work well and executing? Well, what's behind that, and I think we've all talked about this quite a bit, is that engagement is below human capital performance. And that's why in the last, 10 or 20 years, maybe, we've spent a lot of time really talking about engagement and creating different types of engagement surveys and our ability to really understand the underlying thing that's really driving that human capital performance or the talent performance. Well, what Sean and I are talking about and what we're really trying to express in this beginning of our research program is that there's something deeper than engagement that we actually have to care about. Because yes, you might see that engagement is, again, back to Gallup, at a 10-year low right now. Well, how do we fix it? What are the things that you as an organization need to do to fix that? Depends on what's eroding that engagement and eroding that performance to begin with. And the only way to know what's actually doing that is to get even deeper in understanding what's going on. And so this is often the stuff that's like really invisible to organizations. It's really hard to see for most people, like I said, who are not trained as psychologists. It's hard to understand, or it's just, it's not the most accessible stuff. And so what we're trying to explain here is that beneath engagement are our feelings around our needs getting met. And so you can see those human needs and motives for security, growth, and significance. We have those needs. If those are not being met sufficiently, then we're going to have angst. We're going to have a lot of counter pressure to get those needs met somehow. And that's going to override even the best culture. That's going to override even the best incentive systems, because the fundamental driver of all human behavior comes down to our fundamental needs. So that's kind of the conceptual idea. And so you can see that we're not doing that very well. And here's what the problem is when you've got a lot of angst, you're going to get lower engagement. And so you can see here these two density plots, where you've got the darker yellow density plot for high angst individuals. Look at how much lower their engagement is than those who have essentially their needs, satisfied. And so you can see what the difference is on engagement. So this is really that underlying driver that is at the bottom of the causal chain toward your ultimate business goals and your organizational performance. Some of the other interesting things that we looked at were looking at angst levels across job level. So you can see that individual contributors, those who have less legitimate power in the organization due to hierarchical structure, those individuals have much higher angst than managers, and managers have higher angst than the tippy top of the organizational hierarchy. And so what I think is important about this data and this slide is that ultimately, if you're a leader in an organization, your experience and the lens by which you're seeing the world and you're seeing your organization is likely very different than the lens and the experience that the people who are lower in the organization are experiencing the world and experiencing your organization. We also looked across industry. All this stuff is in our report. So if anyone's interested in diving in deeper, it's all there for you. So I want to be conscious of our time, but some interesting patterns around industry and where we're seeing more of that. We also looked at performance, motivation for the mission to be achieved, motivation for the financial performance of the organization. We looked at likelihood of someone saying that they're withholding effort to create equity balance in their exchange of their value for what the organization is providing back. We looked at turnover intention, and we also looked at poachability. So some really interesting findings here, but you can see all of this in the direction that is really informative on that. Hey, angst and the psychology of the people who are in your organization matters a ton. For for every outcome we looked at here, it matters a ton. And these were all statistically significant and with an effect size that is pretty meaningful. So you can take a look at all of that. We also saw that there was something kind of interesting in the talent risks that we're noticing, because as skills gaps are getting wider, people are feeling more angst of insecurity, which is making them more poachable. So if you're worried about your top talent staying with you for the probably very dynamic ride that many organizations are in for in the next several years, as we start bringing in more technology and adapting to different ways of work in the future of work, poachability is going to be a huge talent risk marker that organizations are going to really need to pay attention to. And what we uncovered here is that angst is not good for poachability. If you have a lot of angst in your workforce, it's going to lead to a lot of risk that you're going to lose your top talent. And unfortunately, the other thing we saw is that traditional metrics around turnover intention are not capturing that risk. So the old way that we have been thinking about measuring what's happening in our talent inside of our organizations is not that useful under the conditions that we're facing today. And then we've got a ton of data here on angst levels and ultimate organizational performance, where we were looking at performance relative to industry competitors. And finally, I'll just close here that really our perspective on how to go about solving all of this and how to really move ourselves in the direction of better is through the application of what we call psychological ergonomics, which is about addressing the friction points between your approach to human capital and talent and human psychology, and making those things more in alignment. Just like you would do if you were having physical pain from the work setup of your, your monitor height, or your chair, or your keyboard, you were having pain physically. We are seeing pain psychologically. And the same approach needs to be taken as we would do to fix physical ergonomics by adjusting the monitor height, doing an assessment of your body and your setup. That's the same thing that we're doing, but for psychology. Is let's look at the systems and structures you have in place. Let's identify where those friction points are, and let's fix it. And we can do that, and that's what we're doing at Fractional Insights. So I will stop there, Al. Thank you so much for letting me have the mic for that.
Well, I cannot tell you how excited I personally get when I hear you talk about not only this research, but how you are addressing employee angst. Because, like you, we've been in the field for a long time. Engagement's been kind of the fulcrum of psychometric studies, and it goes deeper, and you are going deeper to the human needs, because engagement is sometimes ephemeral, and why is it? And particularly given these very uncertain times and the external dynamics that not only with the tariffs right now, but with AI, that's creating anxiety. Is my job going to go away? So is that then going to be something that I, as a business leader, can alleviate, elevate confidence, and elevate significance, being seen, all the things that you talked about. So not addressing it presents unnecessary risk. So that's again. So my pointed question is, do you see organizations actually studying angst or something analogous to it, right now? And what's the risk of not going, quote unquote, this deep?
Yeah. Not really. And I think that's where, when Shauna and I decided to join forces and start this enterprise, that was part of the motivation, was kind of noticing that we have insights about the deeper human behavior and motivational forces that really matter for organizational outcomes and success. But there is, I think, some work to be done to help organizations make that invisible stuff more visible. And it's not to say that there's nothing. Like there's lots of great psychologists out there that are helping organizations. There's great vendors out there as well that are supporting organizations in a variety of different ways. But I think we in particular are trying to really get at the entirety of that chain between like I was showing you with the iceberg, from the deep root causes of behavior all the way through to the business outcomes, and linking that all together, illuminating that whole pathway for organizations, taking a systems level view across the whole organization to identify why you might end up having an attrition problem, or an engagement problem, or a performance problem, or an adaptation problem. Why, like, change is really hard. Like, why is it so hard to get people on board with a new way of operating, or bringing in technology, bringing in AI? There can be lots of friction around that. And so all of those problem spaces, that's where we really want to help diagnose why there's something that you can't see that's getting in the way, and how to make that, bring that to the surface, and then address it, so that in perpetuity, you can continue to meet your organizational objectives, even as the dynamics around us change. And the risk, to your question, of not doing that is really just staying stuck in the same cycles that organizations have been in for years and years and years, where we've got an objective, we've got a strategy, we are implementing a new plan or bringing in a new technology, we're taking a different approach to talent or to our culture. All kinds of work is being done with organizations to try to help them achieve their goals, But ultimately, if there are still friction points in the system that haven't been addressed or that aren't able to be seen, we're just going to keep designing things and, piling on different interventions that aren't really looking across the whole system. And you're just going to end up in the same cycle of investing a lot of money, investing a lot of time, and ending up with a result that's still not what you ultimately hoped for. And so we're trying to help organizations kind of break out of that cycle.
Well, you and I have talked about this before. So, I will full disclosure, this is something that I know you and Shauna and I are very passionate about and see as a great opportunity. And you've mentioned it a couple of times, a systematic approach. And it also implies that a systematic approach historically has not been taken. And so to put my own language on this is many employee survey, employee experience initiatives have been driven by HR. There's been an element of selling / convincing internal customers, other stakeholders that this is a good idea. And as we move in the future, with AI effectively affecting the very nature of work, now we have not only HR and those who are responsible for the human experience at work, but we have IT, we have operations, we have legal, we have facilities, we have really everybody who is designing how organizations function and get work done. There needs to be new governance models. They need to be consuming information in new ways at a heightened level of frequency. And as important as anything, we need to be aware of what data and insights we're looking at and for what purpose. And oftentimes these legacy measures aren't appropriate for this day and age. So what you're bringing forth are both a new set of measures that can be considered, and also, and this is where I'll land with the question, what do you think the new governance models or decision-making models you would look like? And I know that's a big question, but who should be in the room from your perspective?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I think one of the things that we've noticed about, in particular, the evolution of sort of legacy models of work and humans being the only kind of real asset towards getting work done, of course, with computers and technology and internet in the last 50 years, but that we're really at this major phase transition where we're going to have quantum leap difference in ability to execute. And one of the things that I think really we need to start thinking about in terms of governance and in terms of decision making and who's in the room is this idea that the way in which we are integrating technology and humans and setting up the systemic structure to extract the maximum value from both of these types of, for lack of better word, like assets or capital, from the value that humans really bring to an organization and the value that technology really brings to an organization is really going to require a interdisciplinary approach. So that means we've got to get the chief innovation or chief information officers, if there is a chief innovation officer, that person too, chief human resource officers, the CEO, and probably even the COO. Like, this is like this problem set of how do we redesign, reimagine, think about integrating the humans, the tech, and setting up the structure and the system and the ways of work under completely different models for the sake of achieving organizational performance. It's really going to require a lot of voices because it touches all of those places at once. It touches humans, it touches tech, it touches the organization of operations. And so I'm excited about helping organizations to build those bridges and get those voices together with the lens of psychology and how do we ultimately elevate human potential by using technology in such a way that allows for the organization to capitalize on what will be the competitive advantage and differentiator, which is the degree to which you do capitalize on that human capital, because the AI is is ubiquitous,
Yeah.
so it's going to be a great equalizer. What's going to be different is how well the humans are able to rise to sort of the next level of impact through the
Yeah,
technology.
well, thank you for saying that. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, I can't overstate my excitement about the approach that you're taking, and how you're taking that approach. A couple more questions and then we'll start to wrap. um, and this is something that is gaining significance for me in my work around the future of work project, is that in Yuval Noah Harari's book Nexus, he talks about myths
Yeah.
being stronger than facts. And as I speak publicly, I've done this for years and years and years, is that I'll ask the crowd, what's the number one reason people leave organizations? And you can hear a mumble, if not shouts, well, immediate manager. And that's
Mhm.
research that's based from Gallup 35 years ago. And it may or may not be but it is a myth that carries the day. And what is going to be most appropriate, in my view, for these leaders in this new way of governing and making decisions is studying the system for which they are responsible at that point in time and getting the truth of the matter so they can take appropriate action as opposed to acting on these myths. And that takes a heightened level of openness to actually invest in new ways of measuring, new ways of analyzing, new ways of consuming information. So, what I would like to do is just get your thoughts on the power of myth, and how leaders must actually invest. This doesn't happen by accident. This is a creative discipline that takes time, effort, energy, and yes, a bit of money. But if it's not done, the risks are, in my view at least, unacceptably high. I mean, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the risks are
Yeah.
existential, you know? The risks are existential for the organization's survival. Um, and I think I wanna start by just naming and acknowledging that what we've been talking about today, and I think what you're alluding to as well, really reflects like a pretty major change in the mindset of leaders who are thinking about how to drive the outcomes that they're trying to drive. It's really asking for a different way of thinking about this. And that includes different types of measurement. It includes different types of talent or skills being brought in. It involves different ways of work cross-functionally and acknowledging the sort of the multidimensional metrics of success that multiple functions are going to be trying to drive, and the interconnectedness of those two things. And one of the things, I know, Al, you and I've talked about this a little bit before, but like how I see the world is that we're all connected. We are all connected. We are all in a system. We're all in this together. And when it comes to helping organizations, it's like what's good for people is good for business. And when the business does well, that's good for the people too. And so bidirectionally, it is a reinforcing system. And that approach, that mindset is, I think, not 100% shared with every leader, that I've ever met. But I do think that if we can help illuminate some of the science, some of the data, some of the proof points that this is an interconnected system, and the more that we recognize that and shift our way of thinking to not just one metric like money, or one metric like attrition, or how do we start looking at the system together as a whole and approaching it with acknowledgement of how interconnected all things are. And you know I think that applies more broadly to sort of the world, our environment. You know, there's lots of ways in which we're all connected, and but especially inside of an organization, it's very clear, and there's a lot of data for that. And so, yeah, that's the message that I hope I can start spreading, and that we can start
Well,
spreading together.
again, thank you. And second to last question, on that vein, is that yes, there is an appetite for leaders historically to, hey, just keep it simple. Just, and there's a point in my view of diminishing returns and actually negative value if you keep it too simple. And so part of our role as analysts, in my view, is that we step into the complexity and we make sense of it. But if we oversimplify, there's danger in that. And one of the things that I'm studying is that we need to create space to actually consider these ideas. See, it's like rush, 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 fast, fast, fast. And it's like, just give me the thing I should do. It's like, if you're a leader, you have a responsibility to press pause, to explore what's happening and what to do about it to achieve the outcomes that you want. So can you just give your thoughts on the danger of oversimplification and the need for space to consider all this insight and this complexity?
Oh, I think that's so right. And yeah, I mean, that is actually something that I think about a lot, because the every organization is different, every individual is different, each of our lived experiences is different, which creates lots of complexity. And I think there's opportunity for frameworks. There's opportunity for, there's some simplification or consolidation, maybe is a better word than simplification, of lots of information and lots of insights to help leaders to make it more approachable and digestible. That said, that has to be taken, all of this stuff, even the model of the universal triad of the 3 human needs, all of that still, though, has to be taken under good stewardship to, like you said, pause, digest, consider the context, consider the history of your organization, consider different data that, triangulating information. And that does take intentionality. It takes some time. It takes depth of thought. And that requires energy. So it has to be like a commitment to the energetic work that's necessary to really take in the whole of the picture and make a good decision coming out of that. But interestingly enough, that's one of the reasons why we named our company Fractional Insights. And there's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is because we really believe that there's multiple ways of knowing, and there's multiple ways of coming to the truth. And any insight, be it from science or be it from lived experience, is fractional by nature. And so we have to bring all this stuff together and take it within the whole, digest it, and then make decisions about what's best.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say it, I think, for the 10th time. Thank you. just thank you for nudging the world's thinking to be grandiose for a second, because I think it's important. I think there's a lot of legacy thinking, legacy processes that need a new place to go. And that's what I see you and Shauna bringing to the world. So again, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. How can our listeners and viewers learn more about you and what you're doing there at Fractional Insights?
Oh, well, I would love for anyone who's interested to follow us on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter. We're putting those out. We're putting out new insight reports regularly now. We've got our next one coming out at the end of this week, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, you can find us at fractionalinsights.ai, Fractional Insights on LinkedIn, and would love to be connected and have the support of the community.
All right. Well, again, Erin, thanks for being your awesome self. Thanks for doing what you do. And not to date this recording, but we're going to be at Unleash next week. We're doing a pre-conference workshop. We got some things coming on the horizon. So excited. Look out for us on the conference circuit. And yeah, you be well. Appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Al. Thank you.